All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, I don't know why I'm wearing my glasses. I don't need to because I'm not reading anything. But anyway, I'm Andrew, aka Evil and Rambo Mindgasms, for the purposes of this chat, and I have the Woke Quartet, aka the Woke Centrist, aka Dusty Cubes, aka Dustin Cubit, and we're gonna do a rapid book chat about Wizard and Glass by Stephen King, which is the fourth book in his Dark Tower series, which is kind of a fantasy western slash sci-fi fantasy slash horror series, and has
Mm,
connections to his other books as well. So it's very interesting. And there's stuff like Cowboys, Witches, Love, and Betrayal. So yeah, we'll talk about that one. And yeah, it's interesting because this one is, as we were saying just before we started this, almost entirely a flashback from Roland's perspective, who's the main character, cowboy slash gunslinger slash wizard. Or
mm,
no, not slash wizard slash knight, cowboy slash gunslinger slash knight. And we finally learn a lot of the details about Roland's mysterious and tragic past that he's been alluding to for the first three books. So that's most of what happens in this one. And yeah, I guess we could just talk about basically the essential plot and characters of the book itself, and also I wanted to talk a little bit about the other references to Stephen King's other books in his broader Ka universe, which is also the word that is used for fate in this series, and also basically seems to be the name of Stephen King's magic system.
mm.
So you want to start off with just saying what you think in general about the book, Dusty?
Well, it's definitely very different from any of the previous entries. I would call this a straight up Western,
Yeah,
which
yeah, I
is,
was noticing that too. Like the most westerny one since the first one, and yeah, probably even more so.
yeah, I would say this is even more so than the first one. And it just reminds me of like, a horse, like a plot to basically steal horses and sell. It's almost like um, if there was like a farm and homestead and like these union soldiers came to investigate and they found out that they were selling all this stuff to the confederate army,
Yeah, yeah, well said. Yeah.
that's kind of like the basic plot, was that they're sent to, well, in this flashback, this is basically Roland's first mission as a gunslinger,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he
and
was,
he and his other gunslinger partners in their quartet, which is people bound by destiny or fate, are people he's referenced before, like Cuthbert, for example. He's referenced
or
many times, and
Keith.
they're all teenagers at this time.
Well, in the audiobook they call him Cuthbert.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I haven't
Yeah.
listened to any of the audiobooks.
Any of them? They're actually pretty good.
Yeah, I have physical
You've heard
copies of all of them
snippets.
except. Yeah, yeah, I've heard the snippets that you sent me with the audiobook narrator who sounds like Dan Carlin, who's really hilarious when he talks about farts and women's dry vaginas
Yeah,
and stuff.
there's a number of, yeah, I think out of, I, I don't know, I just find Stephen King's writing humorous at times.
It is, yeah.
It reminds me, I know he precedes Abercrombie, but I kind of find that they have similar humor when it comes to making fun of dark things. Um,
Oh, yeah,
the,
for
the,
sure.
yeah, so there are like many laughs that I had in this book. Um, and I do plan on reading something called Dreamcatcher or something.
Oh, I actually, that's one of his books that I got a physical copy of at a secondhand bookstore but haven't read yet. So, yeah, maybe we could do a chat about that one too.
Yeah, because after doing some research, I found out that Dreamcatcher, out of all of his books, Dreamcatcher has the most fart references in it.
Oh, nice.
32 from what I was able to find out.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know the specific references, but basically what I did is, that quote about the fart, well, the many in this particular book, but I just put that
Which
in
one? You sent me
quotes.
like 3.
Yeah, the first one I put in quotes, and then I did a Google search, and then I found like a Reddit forum talking about how much Stephen King talks about farts, and
Oh, okay.
somebody went through all the books and like listed how many fart references in each book, and Dreamcatcher was
The
like ridiculously above them all.
internet is a great place sometimes.
So, because I'm always fascinated with toilet humor and things like that when it comes to people who write books, I will have to check out Dreamcatcher.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Overall, I
Speaking
really
of
did enjoy the story, though. I will say the pacing was pretty decent. There were some parts where it seemed a little slow.
yeah, I agree.
Um, I think mainly the parts that didn't catch me as well as kind of the love story aspect of it, because
The
I
which?
had the love story aspect.
Oh, yeah, the love story was just kind of a classic Romeo and Juliet style forbidden love because Roland's love interest, what's her name again?
Susan.
Susan. Yeah, yeah, Susan Delgado. Um, she is promised to this other older man who's the mayor of the town, and
And
he's named Turin, which is a perhaps intentional Lord of the Rings reference because I know Stephen King has done that before. But he's a really terrible person and he rapes her at one point, but she doesn't really have a say in the matter because it's set in kind of like a Western world, as you said. But they fall in love in spite of that, and they have like a secret relationship. But yeah, it's all kind of that part is all kind of predictable for sure.
yeah, it just it was kind of slightly teetering on my suspension of disbelief because Roland's like 14. I was like, Jesus, you're
Yeah, true.
14, and you're like saying you're in love with this girl, and you're like having sex like every other second with her, and you're gonna become like a teenage father. It's like, come on,
Yeah,
this is kind of ridiculous.
I didn't actually think as much about the implications, but yeah, that's true. I kept like forgetting sometimes that they were teenagers and then being reminded whenever Stephen King mentions it.
And it kind of like, I don't know, to me, it's almost like he's supposed to be this, chivalrous knight, and this behavior is like the opposite of that.
Uh, how is he? I get that he doesn't behave as a knight as much, but what makes you think he doesn't behave as with as much chivalry?
Well, like, he knows the girl situation, right? Um, he knows he has a mission to do, and we do see that his boy Cuthbert like brings him to light. It's like, hey, stop fucking around. You're just like messing this mission up because of this girl. And he finally like comes around to it how messed up he had been because he hadn't been paying attention to things. Um, but just like if he's a chivalrous knight, you would want to do honor by the woman, and he's just kind of sneaking
Yeah,
around and screwing her like in hidden places and all that. That doesn't seem like very chivalrous to me.
yeah. I guess like I got the impression that they were doing that in spite of his desire to be noble and chivalrous, just because they were so in love.
Yeah, but I don't even know if you could call it love. To me, it seemed more of an infatuation than anything else.
Well, especially since he's 14. I'm not sure how old
Right.
she's supposed to be, but I think maybe a
She was a
similar
year
age.
older, maybe. It said
Oh,
she
okay.
was like 15.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, especially when you're teenagers, you can confuse lust for love for sure.
Yeah, I don't think they're like seriously in love.
I think
Um,
they feel like they are though, because they don't know the difference.
yeah, yeah, possibly. Because I don't know. I feel like if he really loved her, he would have kept his distance. Like
Yeah, and
ultimately, their
he tried
involvement
to
with
at
each
first.
other, yeah, their involvement led to her demise.
It did. It did. Because big spoiler, she ends up getting burned alive at the stake.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
because
At,
he didn't keep her at a distance.
was it the yeah, I think that how they met in the first place was that previously she had been a prostitute and he lost his virginity to her before they met
Uh,
again.
no, what happened was he was in his way, on his way into that town. She was on her way home from visiting the witch who had like fingered her or whatever,
Right.
and he offered to walk her into town. But she wasn't like a
Okay.
prostitute, and
I thought I remembered that they had met previously. Maybe I was just I think I might have just been confused about that part
no,
because I
there's a
know that he was
backstory.
okay.
There's a backstory before he goes on his mission, and his backstory is that he goes to a brothel in Gilead, but this is
Oh,
like a
right.
different girl. It's not the same girl.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah,
then his
Gilead
dad
is
walked
a
in on him. His dad like walked in on him while
yeah.
they were getting coffee.
Yeah. Yeah,
But yeah,
Gilead
that
is a
happened to Gilead.
totally different part of the world.
Yeah, so no, it's the same, different person. And she wasn't a prostitute. Well, I guess her aunt sold her out. Her aunt is probably one of the most vile characters in this book.
Yeah, she's like one of the worst characters in the book, like right up along with Rhea and Randall Flagg slash the Man in Black.
Yeah, so we should probably talk about how the cliffhanger from the last book gets resolved.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so from when we last met the heroes in the last book, they were gonna do a riddle contest to see
Right.
if they could stop Blaine. What ended up
The
happening is none of the riddles
sentient
worked.
Blaine is the sentient suicidal slash homicidal train from the kind of sci-fi fantasy post-apocalyptic future realm that we find out that Roland and the rest of his quartet are in. We found that out in the previous book.
All right, so Roland's best riddles fail to stump him. The riddles from the riddle book fail to stump him. Susanna has nothing. The person who defeats Blaine is Eddie, and Eddie defeats Blaine by telling stupid jokes.
Yeah, yeah. He tells them stupid jokes that like don't really have an answer that actually makes sense. I
Yeah.
remember that, yeah.
So Blaine just goes crazy and malfunctions, and they end up crashing in Topeka, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get to
Yeah,
Topeka, they end up getting inside
Kansas.
of the world of The Last Stand.
Yes, exactly. And then them being in Kansas connects later on to a whole bunch of Wizard and Oz references.
Yeah, and Randall Flagg shows up and some other crazy, not crazy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, Rendell Flagg and Rhea and the thinny they call it, which is the it seems like it's the gradual disintegration of your realm or something like that. Um, and it's like this area that is sort of hypnotic and draws you into it, but you don't know what'll happen. It's almost like it's a black hole or something like that.
Oh, they call it the
And
thingy, or the what was it called?
the thinny,
Thinny, thinny. There you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
the
needed to do some more research on that because like, what the hell is this Finny thing? Like,
right.
it's
Well,
so
it's interesting
strange.
because there's that little connection because they're Roland and Eddie and the rest of his quartet, Susanna and Jake and Oi, that little animal that's Jake's pet. They all they all come across that thingy in that current time, and then during the flashback, which is the majority of the book, there's that thingy also. And it reminds me
Right.
too of how you said this is kind of the most Western book because there's there's the Thinny, there's Rhea, the witch who is using the pink crystal ball to view things and try to manipulate events, and then there's Randall Flagg slash the Man in Black slash uh, basically Roland's nemesis who is manipulating things behind the scenes. But both of those characters are kind of for most of the plot and the thingy too, and all of those fantasy aspects are kind of just more in the background until almost the very end of the book when we see more of Randall Flagg, who isn't really present in most of the book.
Right. And even when he shows up at the end, he it's almost like he's not even physically there. It's not like it's more like he induces a dream like reality. So
Yeah,
it like that end got a little bit confusing for me as I was trying to figure out what was going on. I know that they were trying to allude to like one of the visions that um, Roland had previously seen when he touched the wizard's glass. I know they tried to link that with what was going on at the end of the book as him
right.
having seen this before, and he knew it was part of what it was that he had viewed way back in the past, which is kind of why they went through his backstory to
Right.
show
Yeah,
how
yeah. So
important that was.
when he touched the seeing glass before, he basically had premonitions of future events. Yeah.
Hmm.
And he saw because there was a break in Roland telling his story, which is a flashback at one point, basically after Susan had gotten murdered. He talks with the rest of his quartet for a while, and then he explains these events that had come to pass that he saw in the glass, which is that uh, he went he went back to Gilead to see his mother and father and continue his mission. And also importantly, the when he first grabs the glass, that's when he learns about the Dark Tower and the Dark Man, and that's when he learns his mission to follow the path of the beam. But he sees the events that eventually come to pass, which is Rhea um, basically putting a magic spell or some kind of illusion on him to make it look that like when he saw his mom, she made it look like it was her. So she tricked him into killing his own mother because he thought he was shooting Rhea the witch, which is
Hmm.
another crucial part of his tragic past, of course.
And he did come to terms that it wasn't he who shot his mom, it was Rhea who ultimately killed his mother.
Yeah. And I can definitely understand how phenomenally difficult that would be to accept.
Yeah. So, yeah, we get to see all the stuff that happens to Roland in the past, how he develops. So this is a completely this book revolves around Roland's character development and
Hmm.
how he what makes him tick. Like what makes him as the person he is now that is so dedicated to finding this dark tower, and we kind of find out the origins of his motivations behind finding the dark tower, and kind of we also see, damn, he's been on this path for many years. As I kind of assume that he's probably like in his late 30s, maybe his 40s.
Yeah, I'd
Like,
say so.
Yeah, so he's probably on this path for 20 to 30 years trying to find this tower. And we also get to see his former quartet and the way that they operated. And what the interesting thing too is like I really want to know like what happened to this quartet because we don't really get to see that.
True.
He kind of alludes to it, but we never get to hear or see what actually happens to them. But we do find out that at some point in time, I guess they died, obviously, because they're not there now.
Yep.
And he makes allusions saying, like, all the people, he always ends up getting the people in this contact killed, which is why he's kind of reluctant about putting anybody that he's with now in too much danger.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it
So,
sounds like he also doesn't like the idea of using people, but he understands that he has to because his mission is basically like the life and death of the universe as he sees it.
yeah, definitely. That's how important the path to find the Dark Tower and stop the Man in Black is.
Hmm.
The I was mentioning to you a while ago before we started the chats the main references to other books that I noticed, and similarly to other books where we've seen crossovers to other Stephen King books. Obviously, The Stand is a major one, which you and Parker and I did a podcast about a long time ago, which is basically Stephen King's post-apocalyptic story about a virus that ravages and almost destroys the world and almost causes the human species to go extinct, and then there ends up eventually being a religious war between Randall Flagg from The Stand and Mother Abigail, who is like the positive godlike figure who is in opposition to him. So the Stand is one of the main ones, along with it and Insomnia. And I've noticed references to those other two books in the other Dark Tower books as well. I was remembering I looked up this character, the Crimson King, because he sounded familiar to me, but I didn't remember what he was from. And he's
Hmm.
basically kind of the main villain in Insomnia, and there are a lot of deep connections to the Ka universe and that sort of stuff in that book, which is why we're going to talk about that after the Dark Tower series at one point. And then there are a lot
Hmm.
of references, a lot of, I would say, more shorter and indirect references to it, because the characters praise the great turtle sometimes, and there is a turtle god at the very end of it. So yeah, there's some really interesting crossover there, especially like with the term Ka. It's fate or destiny in Roland's world, and it is basically what Stephen King's giant interconnected universe, in which most of his stories take place, is called. And then it's also basically the name of the magic powers or magic system. Like, I think that's what the magic powers that characters use are called in Insomnia. And I think, if I remember correctly, that's basically what the Shine is in The Shining.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really interested in investigating this Ka universe now. I think this series has really set me off into looking into it. I really like these kind of interconnected stories. I guess this is Stephen King's MCU of sorts.
Yeah,
His his robot universe, his Cosmere, whatever you might call it.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I did hear all those references, and a lot of the references happen. Well, one, the stand references are pretty glaringly clear as they
yeah.
interact with the character directly, and he names himself as
Hmm.
Flag, so we know where he comes from. And also, whenever he went into his visions with the wizard's glass, That's when he started seeing things and making references to those other series as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, what
Yeah.
were they again?
Well, his talk of the Crimson King was because of what he saw in the
Oh,
Wizard's
right.
Glass.
Okay. Oh yeah,
Um,
I remembered the Crimson King reference by other characters. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So, um, and I know just from doing light research that there are some other references he makes when he's like having his vision with the Wizard's Glass that definitely have to do with other Stephen King books.
Right.
I can't be too specific because I don't really know what those references mean. But because I was trying to make a little bit more sense of what he was saying, and I did look up stuff online. But the only thing I know is like it's just chock full of references to
Right.
other series.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, they're probably harder to understand if you haven't read the books either.
Right. So like I haven't read these books, so I don't understand these references for the most part, except for the sand. Um,
Right.
but other than that, if he's referencing anything else, I have no clue. As my Stephen King knowledge is pretty limited, I've only read The Stand and these Dark Tower books, so I don't know much else about his universe other than these two series. And I haven't even finished Dark Tower, so we're barely getting through this, you and me, because you haven't read it either, right?
Yeah,
So
I haven't read I haven't read the other Dark Tower books yet, but I've read other than The Stand, I've read some of his other books than you. I might have read even maybe like a dozen or so of his books because he has so many. Read Insomnia I mentioned and and I've read Bag of Bones. Um, what else? Oh yeah, I read Salem's Lot, which is a vampire book, which was really interesting. I read Carrie, Cujo, one of his trilogies. What actually I think maybe his only trilogy about a retired detective who's on the hunt for a serial killer who has kind of like dark magic powers. So
mm,
yeah, I'm probably not remembering all of them, but I've definitely read a bunch of his books. I've read a few compilations of short stories too.
okay. Yeah, really interested. This book, I really enjoyed it. It did seem a bit lengthier than the other ones. Maybe it's just that the plotting was a little bit slower.
Yeah. It was like in terms of page count, it was the longest one so far. But yeah, I agree. Also, in terms of pacing, it was probably the slowest. And because of that, it's probably my least favorite book in the series so far. But I'm definitely still a big fan of it. It's just one thing that I kind of appreciate about this series so far is that each one seems to be totally unexpected a totally unexpected sequel to the previous book in some ways, and there's a different sort of story structure in that stuff. So that's interesting for sure.
Well, I think I kind of like it better than the first book. The first book just seemed really surreal to me.
Hmm.
If, like like the world that was built in the first book was very loose. So it was difficult for me to kind of imagine what was actually going on
Oh,
in the
okay.
world.
Yeah, that's fair
It's
enough.
like
Also, the
all
first one is kind of the most basic one too. So maybe if I reread the series again at some point, which I probably will, maybe in my reread I would like the fourth one more than the first one.
because the first one is more like a short story. Like it's
Yeah,
not
it
that
almost
long
is.
at
I think
all.
the physical book's only about barely over 300 pages or so.
Yeah, so I remember it being fairly short,
Hmm.
and um, like we do get introduced to two characters, Roland and Jake, but their relationship is like super strange, and we
Mm-hmm.
kind of don't even know what's really going on in Roland's world at all.
Yeah,
Um, I know we get like a flashback about his training, but as far as like them traversing through Midland, I think that's what they call it.
yeah.
It's a very vague description of
Oh,
the state of the
I think
world.
it's mid-world.
Midworld, there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would put this above the first book, and I just think that this has more character development, more world building, like solid. Um, we see how flawed he is. He's like way more flawed in this book than he was in the first book. Um, and I think there's just deeper characterization in the second book. And I like his sidekicks. His two buddies are real interesting.
Yeah,
They got
yeah.
interesting abilities. I think his one of his friends is like has like a kind of a psychic ability, and then
Oh yeah,
uh,
the touch they call it. Yeah, both he and Roland have that, which is kind of like psychic or telepathic ability, yeah.
yeah, so his ability is pretty high. Um, and then Cuthbert, I guess, is just really good with slingshots.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Because I don't think him and his friend aren't actually gunslingers yet.
I
Because
think
Roland was the only one to pass the test.
one of them is, isn't he? Or at least one of them is really good with guns because I remember that big shootout scene close to the end with the descriptions of like Roland just wreaking havoc on people with his guns, and I thought maybe one of his partners was too. Which is the one who doesn't have the slingshot, who's not Cuthbert? I forget what his name is.
I forget his name too, but he had a machine gun.
Yeah, that's easy to not mess with. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe you're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah, because Roland was everybody, all of them had guns, but Roland was the only one who had the sandalwood grips, which would indicate those are
Okay.
gunslinger guns.
Okay.
Because I know towards the end, um, the only time Cuthbert used the slingshot was when they were doing stealth work. When
Right.
they went loud, he brought out the guns.
Right.
So they all
Okay.
use guns. It's just that Cuthbert had the ability to take people out silently with the slingshot.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, he had the Thinny, he had Citgo, which was the oil company.
Oil company. Yeah.
Um, that's an American oil company here.
Oh,
You
okay. I
had
didn't even know it was the name of a real oil company.
yeah, Citgo's real. It's like there's a bunch of Citgo gas stations here.
Okay.
Seneco is one as well. They mentioned Seneco. They mentioned another gas company as well.
That's
But we
interesting
get
too because the gas being there and they also mentioned that they have I think perhaps limited gas powered electric lighting in the small town is kind of a perhaps slightly forward into the are kind of rather slightly forward into the future aspects of what you would expect from a Western world, which is similar to what we find out in the previous book, the third book, which is that there are basically sci-fi fantasy elements to Midworld, and it's kind of it's actually kind of a futuristic post-apocalyptic world that is regressed back into a Western world rather than actually being in the Western period of history and having all that oil around too. Similarly to how there are these little fantasy elements like witches and wizards with Rhea and Randall Flagg, but obviously in fantasy elements rather than sci-fi fantasy elements.
yeah. So I know I got a hard out. One thing I'm going to mention too
Right.
is that we find out in this book that the world of the Stand is not our world. because the
Yeah.
names of their baseball teams don't match the worlds that the three come from. So Jake, Susan, and Eddie. And I'm guessing is that Jake, Susan, and Eddie come from our actual world.
Oh, okay. I was gonna ask you about that because I remember that you were saying with the previous book that your prediction is perhaps none of the or the multiple different worlds are actually just kind of multiple different possibilities of the same world or something like that.
Well,
And
my
yeah, that's
original hypothesis was that they're all the same world, just at different times. But this
right,
book
right, right.
confirms that they're not. They're like different worlds.
Okay, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting too that there are all these multiple different worlds, and then there's some similar aspects and some different aspects. Like you said, the names of baseball teams are different, for example, and as you were just saying, different. They're different parallel realities, but also at different periods of history because Jake, Eddie, and Susanna all come from different time periods in what we thought originally was our world, but it turns out is a different parallel reality, as you were saying, or
Yeah,
perhaps, or actually three
Jake,
different
Susan,
parallel
and
realities.
Eddie, I believe, come from our world because when they were
Oh, okay,
confirming, they were trying to figure out where they were when they were in Kansas, and Kansas world is the stand world. And the teams that
right.
were playing for the baseball teams weren't the ones in our world, and the ones that they were referencing are the ones in our
Oh,
world.
oh, I didn't get that the the world that they're exploring in Kansas is supposed to be the aftermath of what happens in the stand.
Right, that's what it was. They're into the stand world.
Oh, okay. I got that they were in the
That's why
stand world,
they.
but I guess I didn't realize that it's supposed to have happened after the events of the stand for some reason.
No, it's just
But that
like
makes
three
sense.
weeks. It's like 3 weeks after that entire town got like tibsified.
Right. And that's interesting too, because given the ending of the stand, we don't actually know how that happened. Because at the stand, there were still the last remnants of the human civilization, and the Dark Man gets defeated. But then there's like uh, the epilogue in which we see that he's still alive, and we know probably from the Dark Tower series that he's just come alive in a separate reality, which it seems like is probably this world.
Right. All right. So it's a little past 5, so I will need to get going.
Right. I know you need to go. All right. Yeah. Yeah, I thought it would be fine to just do a rapid chat about this one because, like we were saying, it's a pretty straightforward plot. And yeah, we just glossed over most of the content, but I think we pretty much covered the main events and main characters of the book. And yeah,
Hmm.
everyone watching should read this if you haven't done so already. And if you haven't, we didn't really spoil that much other than we kind of spoiled a few main events, but it's definitely since we just did a short chat about it, it's definitely worth the book is worth getting into more and the entire series as well, of course. And
Yeah,
yeah,
agreed.
I guess you already mentioned uh your evaluation of it basically that you like it more than the first one, and I think I might say it's my least favorite. I don't know though, but I still gave it 3 stars or something. Do you remember what rating you gave it?
I think I also gave it 3.
Okay.
I,
All right.
I would
So
give it 3, but if I were to rank them in order, I'd put this as my least favorite is the first book. This would be my next on the list. Um, and I think number three, I think is my favorite.
Actually, yeah,
So
I was just thinking probably the third one is my favorite, and my second one is probably my second favorite.
right, right. So my first favorite is, you know what? I'm gonna switch it. I think I really like two more than
Okay.
three when we meet Susan and Eddie, and I'm gonna put that at number one, and then three will be like the cybernetic bear, that adventure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's really
it's
interesting.
really hard.
Yeah,
I almost want to put that as a tie. It's like,
yeah,
mm,
me too. Me too, actually. I
I
almost
think
want
I'm
to put
gonna
it as
tie
a
it.
tie
I'm gonna
between
tie
2
it.
and 3.
I
Yeah?
think
Okay.
two and three are equally as good, and then the next one down is going to be this one, and then um, the worst. It's not bad in any sense of the word, but my least favorite would be the first book.
Yeah. I have very similar ratings, if not perhaps identical. If I could have a tie, I probably would have the second and third one as a tie. And yeah, our ratings might be slightly different for the first or the fourth one, but yeah, it's hard to tell. But yeah, they're all definitely worth reading, and the second and third ones are the most interesting for sure. So yeah, everyone check out these books and share a chat everywhere. Thanks everyone for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. I'm going to be going out of town, but I might release a clip that my friend Jenkins made from me and that's from our podcast we did a long time ago about the From Dusk Till Dawn movie. So I'll probably release that when I'm out of town. And yeah, subscribe or check out my Patreon page. Link is in the description as always. Smash that like button. Share share this everywhere, and share Mindgasms all over the place. Looks like Dusty had to go there. And most importantly, like I always say, always remember this: the funk cures all, and grooves in the heart. And Stephen King's books are awesome. Some of them are hit or miss, but his Dark Tower series is awesome. So is it. So is The Stand, and so are plenty of others. All right, so I think Dusty probably can't say anything else there. So thanks again, Dusty, for talking. Always fun. And thanks again, everyone. And adios until next time. Oh, also check out Dusty's channel, The Woke Centrist, where we will be doing more talks about fantasy books there too soon too. I think the next one we'll be discussing is the second book in the Rangers Apprentice series called The Burning Bridge. So check that out as well. All right, adios until next time, everyone.